Well, good morning, everybody. Before we dig into the forecast today, I thought we'd do a little bit of verification on the seasonal forecast for December, January, February. The newest model runs that were just released this morning now take us all the way to March, so we can kind of get an idea on how this winter season is going to finish up. Now, remember, when we look back on NOAA's forecast, we look back on the European model forecast, I just want to remind you that we don't look at these in terms of like exact numbers. It's really more about a pattern. We're looking to see if the model is giving us any indication as to what a given season might look like. And that's all we're doing here. But I'm doing this because I will be, hopefully by the end of this week, if I don't get all the data in by then, by Monday, giving you some kind of a complete picture on what I think this upcoming spring will look like, and then what I think summer might do. Okay, so with all that as a background, this was released on October the 19th, and we're looking at the NOAA seasonal temperature outlook here, which we had warmer across the northern tier of the U.S., near normal, and possibly a little bit cooler than average the closer you got down to the south. And then this was their precipitation forecast. So they picked up on a pretty dominant subtropical jet, and at times weaker flow that would result in fewer systems rolling through the Canadian prairie and across the northern plains of the United States into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes states. So that was the outlook from NOAA. They kept it pretty consistent as we approached winter, and I want to show you the ECMWF forecast. So I'm going to take you back to last December 1 when this was released. And what did they call for? Something quite kind of similar, very active and wet across the south, but they also had a wetter area in through here, drier mid-south into Ohio Valley, drier Great Lakes, drier signal in parts of the Pacific, drier in parts of Montana. I often kind of include parts of Montana in the Pacific Northwest. I shouldn't do that. But you can see they were wetter in the Pacific Northwest. So just ideas here, right? And why don't we look at their temperature forecast for the same time? Again, very similar to what NOAA had, with the most mild air kind of anchored into the central part of North America with near normal to the south. All right, with all of that, this is what the temperatures have looked like. So despite the about 10-day long Arctic outbreak we had in mid to late January, the warmth in December and now the warmth at the end of January and February has outdone that. And overall, you got to hand it to them. The longer range forecast picked up on this pattern, I think, pretty well. And given where the next 10 days are going, 10 to 15 days are going, there's not going to be a whole lot that's going to make this change over to the bluer range of the colors. So again, when you look at these, just the bluer colors represent the lower half of the distribution, the red upper half, and the numbers actually give you the rank. And the time period over this is always 132 years while we're in 2024, okay? On the precipitation side of it, I want to remind everybody that a lot of what you've got here in Minnesota, because this is really showing up quite bright, isn't it? But a lot of this was very early. And after that, I'm talking about way back in December. After this, we've not delivered much in here. A lot of this was from that big blizzard that went through around Christmas. Remember that? So since then, we've taken a pretty large section of our northern United States, northern plains, upper Midwest, and left it out of the flow. And as a consequence, things have gotten quite dry there. I've continued to mention this whole section here of New Mexico and Texas that I think has been drier. And as of late, while we've been drier here along the coastal Carolinas, overall winter has not been unkind to that area, and we've prevented major drought from going into that region. Overall, we would look at this winter and say it was a good winter to start to reduce drought area, and we've reduced it since last fall by about 20%. So we just got to kind of take stock of this and remember how well the models have been performing so that we can use them again based off of the recent performance and give you an idea about where they're going to go. All right, so with all of that, here's kind of the main stories we're following. The newest updates again from the models, despite pushing warmer air into Alaska, right? We are not going to be seeing extended cold conditions. The coldest region is going to be right here over the next 10 days. It's now been limited. There's just a shot at cold air coming all the way to the Gulf Coast, but it's going to quickly get out of there. I'll show you that. And overall, the next 10 days has gone back over quite mild, which means February is going to end on a more mild note overall. So, we had thought this was going to get farther to the south, but it's too brief of an event to do that. And the other thing is our next 10 days looking at precipitation compared to normal. We are going to watch multiple systems coming in late this week and over the weekend and early next week into the West Coast as the Pacific jet kind of gives us one more extension. And during that time frame, much of the south is going to be drier. We do have a couple of systems rolling through the central part of the United States we'll detail in a few moments, but drier overall in this area as we go forward. Yesterday's snowstorm that hit New England, just to kind of give you an idea on its kind of whole lifespan. Remember, this one came out of the Four Corner states after hitting Southern California and Arizona quite hard with a lot of moisture. This is the snow track kind of left down here, which is all but gone. And then this is the kind of newest totals we've got for parts of New England. Now, this goes through 7 o'clock last night, which is when most of that snow was done. But there's, if you just look here, this is the 8 to 12 inch color range. And you can see there's a good chunk in here that saw pretty heavy snowfall amounts overall. But we'll have to watch the temperatures to see how quickly this melts and gets out of there, because the snow that was on the backside over here is already gone. Take a look at yesterday's satellite data as the sun's rising here this morning along the East Coast. If I just take you back, this was all that was left by yesterday afternoon and evening with that mild air that was in place. That snow right in through there is just out, and it's melting pretty quickly. I love it. This is moisture. That's moisture returning back into, a big section of our cotton and winter wheat belt down here, stretching over into parts of Missouri as well. Outside of that, we're going to take a look later this week or early next week again at the western U.S. snowpack. It'll be something, again, that'll be in transition given the continued good flow we're going to get out of the Pacific Ocean here. But as we kind of look forward in this forecast, it's a reminder that over the last 72 hours, we've seen very heavy rainfall that has hit parts of the southeast, an area that has really broken free of drought after what was, especially down here in the Delta region and lower Mississippi Valley, what was an extremely dry late summer and fall. So this is what our precip looks like just over the last 3 days in total. Now, speaking of that, the all hazards weather map shows several areas down here. These are our rivers that are showing up in flooding. And while the Mississippi River is, like we talked about, oscillating up and down in its values, like today it's 12.78 feet above low stage, that was kind of what was expected. And we are just going to continue to probably watch it do something like this as we go forward in time. That's very normal that it bounces up and down like that. But the good news is the river has recovered. The other part of the story to watch is we do have a system that's going to sneak out, come across parts of Montana. We even have winter storm warnings out for Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana here. And we're going to watch that one spread some snow across South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. There's a second system that's going to dip down a little bit farther to the south. I'll show you that one in a minute. And then we're going to watch again for the West Coast to continue to see increased chances of more snow. So expect more winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, and warnings here as we kind of go forward in this forecast. Okay, I do want to show you season-to-date snowfall, so I just like to keep up to date on this map. This was through yesterday morning, so it does not include the numbers for the system that just went through this part of the Northeast. But I'm just thinking about the flooding threat again, and normally our biggest flood threat in spring happens on the Red River of the North, and then all of the tributaries that get into the Missouri River, the Ohio River, and the Mississippi, for 3 kind of terribly drawn lines there. And it's just a point to make that this is an area that, unlike a year ago, does not have massive snow amounts on it. And we're going to have to question whether or not we can get big snows into this area because of the time of year it is, right? As we move into March, it's not like we can't get a March or even an early April blizzard to roll through this area. That's possible, but we have to question, is it probable for this upcoming year for that to occur? There has been, the good news overall is that warmer pattern has caused any snow that comes through to melt. And that's why since January 1, our soil moisture values at 100 centimeters or 40 inches, this is the root zone numbers, have really, been improved overall. And while we still are watching parts of Wisconsin, this section of Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, there's a big area in through here that still needs more of a recharge. We typically rely on March and April rains to do that kind of recharging. And I'm going to show you again my March analogs here in a few moments. Okay, so with all of that as a backdrop, here's what we're keeping an eye on right now. So we kind of have our split flow, big high here that is over this part of Alaska, and there's our low. So the Pacific jet comes in and just busts up. And we get the subtropical component here, and the polar component, which is very weak and highly amplified, is up here in Alaska. This is the wave we're going to keep an eye on, this little short wave right here that's going to sneak across the country, and then it's going to be our attention having been turned to this. This is what we're going to have to go to next, the Pacific jet extension. Okay, so let's talk about the probability maps. I love these WPC probability maps. I find them useful. This is the next 3 days, the chance of getting 2 inches of snow. All right, so we're kind of keeping an eye on that little wave that's here rolling across the country, across this kind of mid to northern tier of the U.S. into this part of Ontario and Quebec, delivering some snow over the Great Lakes. This is the chance of getting 4 inches. We step that up. So our heaviest band right in through here likely. And then let's go ahead and take it up to 8 inches. Now remember, what you're seeing over here in the Cascades in the Sierra Nevada and parts of the Rockies is also coming from the subsequent systems coming out of the Pacific. But we'll keep an eye right in this area for the heaviest snows sneaking across the country. From there, I want to show you the high-res NAM this morning. And let's pick this up. There we go, about 6 a.m. when I'm recording here. And watching the snow spread out of Montana and Wyoming into South Dakota today. It's going to get right there into Minnesota this afternoon and this evening, and it'll go across Iowa, delivering some colder rain, but snow to the north, and then that system sneaks into Wisconsin and Michigan in the overnight hours, getting to early Thursday morning, and spreads the snow over the eastern Great Lakes and Ontario by the time we get into, Thursday afternoon and evening. So that's another shot at snow coming into parts of New England. So that's system number 1. Behind it, we're going to watch again. We're kind of sandwiching some air in here with some weak low pressure developing off the Rockies, but more about the high pressure that's to the north, adding another batch of snow right in this same area. And as that goes through, it's going to spread into, again, parts of South Dakota, getting into Iowa, enough colder air this time. And we're going to keep an eye on this event, getting more snow, I think, a little bit farther to the south by the time we get into Friday. But the high-res NAM only runs out 60 hours, and I'm using the 6Z run, so we only get out there to about noon on Friday, okay? What is helping this, you kind of notice here, is look at the plume of moisture coming up out of Mexico into Texas. So this is primarily going to stay in southern and eastern Texas, not hitting the rest of the state, but it's going to be delivering some widespread rain into those areas. And then finally, just take a look at the west. There's a low right there. This is going to be noon today, curling in, hitting the southern Cascade Mountains here, hitting northern California. This is why we have the winter storm watches and warnings out for that area. Expect some pretty strong winds with this as well. And that's the system that kind of curls in underneath or in between the deeper low to the south and the bigger ridge to the north. So I think the high-res NAM's got a pretty good handle on this for the next couple of days here. Now, after that, I want to show you what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. I haven't showed you this in a while, but let's just look at it again. I was talking with a colleague of mine at University of Nebraska-Lincoln yesterday. I got a chance to visit Eric Hunt, and he said, hey, I really like looking at these North Pacific jet phase diagrams. I said, I do too. I wish we had a full Pacific jet phase diagram. So rather than just the North Pacific, I'd like to see more of the flow, not just there, actually the whole world. I like to see this stuff. Okay, our jet's extended now, but I just want to take note that it's going to shift a bit south and then get back over toward Japan. So that will change the entirety of the subtropical to polar jet relationship in the next 10 to 15 days. So this is that thing I mentioned on Monday, like, holy cow, a new pattern. And I want to show you what this is going to do here in a moment. First, let's see it, okay? So this is the jet extension we're talking about that's going to show up this weekend. So this is the setup right there that's going to be pushing up quite a bit of moisture into California and Oregon, several systems coming into the west. So what I'm talking about here is once we get past Sunday into Monday, so again, very strong flow. We'll show you the precip totals in a moment. What happens is the jet just kind of pushes across the southern tier of the United States, and then we watch the Pacific give us a whole new look by about the 23rd. So what I'm referring to here is there's the jet retraction. There's the southward branch of it, the subtropical. And here's the polar branch. I haven't seen that in a long time. And so to see that showing up here, we're just going to watch what the evolution of that is for the western United States. Now, here's what I'm talking about. As we get out there toward the end of February, what I will be watching for in March is southwest flow. So if you can get the jet to dip here, and then generally speaking come across the country like this, that is, for nearly all of us, the whole country, that's a very active pattern. Now, the main jet is down there. I'm just talking about the flow. So if the flow begins to make that transition, this sets us up with a very active March. And I think it's being kind of spurred along by the retraction of the Pacific jet. Now, what's the MJO doing? Collapsing. It's collapsing back into null space. It's being pulled out of our dominant teleconnection right now. It'll come back at some point, but that's what's allowing this polar jet, I think, to begin to show back up again. It's part of it. It's just part of the story here. All right, so with that, can I show you the models? GFS versus the European. Much better agreement now on the weekend systems. Remember yesterday how they were really in poor agreement? Well, this is by tonight, getting into early tomorrow morning, the snow spreading out of South Dakota into Minnesota through Wisconsin over toward Michigan, while the bigger system comes into California and Oregon. See it right there? So that's through Thursday. Let's get us out here to Friday morning. This is the second push, so we're going to watch right in through here. You can see the snow kind of sneaking through while the plume of moisture opens up into southern and eastern Texas, and our next big system comes into the west. So here we are. This is Friday morning, Friday midday, Friday evening. That one's spreading some snow through parts of Nebraska, maybe getting into Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, southern Indiana. It's not much, but there's snow coming in there. And then that one goes over toward the mid-Atlantic. Could add some snow around the D.C. area by Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. It is kind of in both models here, with that flow that came through Texas kind of staying along the Gulf Coast. Now, this is when we have our cold air coming in. And now you notice that the ECMWF's projection of that longer area of high pressure now matches the GFS. Remember, the GFS was much different earlier this week. Well, then going to pay attention to the next big front coming into the west on Saturday. This is Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening. Very wet conditions going into the weekend for the west as multiple systems target that area. Weak little clipper moves over the top of the Great Lakes, spreading some more snow into New England, but a lot of our attention is going to go to the west. This is next Monday. Getting into next Tuesday and Wednesday, we have at least 3 or 4 systems coming into the west with this. Now, what will be interesting to see is after that, do we start to set ourselves up with a storm track that does something like this? Or does it stay to the south? If we can get that flow just to come in like that, it is a good signal all across the board for delivering more moisture to the whole of the U.S. That's the point. We want, in spring, flow like that. We just across the country from the southwest. This is a great setup to open the Gulf of Mexico. It's a great setup to deliver moisture far to the north. It keeps the west wet, and it's a great way to finish winter. Now, can it bring in severe weather? It can. Can it bring in big snows? Yeah, but we need that before we fully get into this new season. Now, I say that, and I also understand that some people down here in Texas, I got tweeted out yesterday, they're already planting, got corn going in early. So I get it. This is where we are in the season here. Okay, total precip. This is the next 7 days from the European model, looking at total accumulated precipitation. This is what the GFS is suggesting. Pretty similar overall in the patterns, but just take note, Northern California grabbing another 5, 6, 7 inches of rain out of this. From there, let's go have a look at the snowfall side of it. Here's a week's worth of snow from the ECMWF. Look at how much more we're going to be adding here into parts of the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada with that systems coming in this weekend, plus the one that's coming in today. This is great. I mean, this is another 2 to 3 feet of snow, but we have kind of a couple of different paths. One there, the second one here, bringing in some snow, and this is what the GFS is suggesting. So European model, GFS, look, that's pretty good agreement, right? I like that. Overall, pretty good on the path. But let's go ahead and just give you the ensemble numbers to kind of get a better idea. And this is the chance over the next 10 days of an inch. If we step that up to 3 inches, there we go. We can see the heaviest snows coming right in through here outside of the west, right in through this area. And possibly into Pennsylvania, maybe clipping the Appalachian Mountains here, but Virginia, Maryland, this is that second system that could give us some snow. All right, there's the chance at getting 6. Again, downwind of the Great Lakes. And 12, this is good. Look at this, 12 to 18. Love this. This is some good late season snowpack, which I'll be excited to kind of assess once we get out there toward the end of February, how winter treated us in the west. On the total side of the precipitation equation, so this includes both liquid and snow, this is who's going to be drier in this pattern. So again, much of the southwest, western Texas, that's an area, just keep watching here. Parts of the plains, low probability of getting more than 1/10 of an inch out of the next 10 days. This is where the half-inch number looks like. Okay, who's going to be seeing less than a half inch? And the wetter side of everything is here. So notice that most of the wettest conditions are going to be where the Pacific Jet extends and hits California. There's the probability of 2 inches. Still wet down in Florida, because of the subtropical component of the jet. And here's 4. So yeah, we're quite wet in this area. All right, beyond that, take a look at this. There is my northern branch of the jet I keep talking about. And what I'm interested in is as we go from the 24th to the 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th and 29th. That's it. That's the end of February. Look at this. Now, if we get that, guess what we get? Southwest flow. And that could give us a very interesting end of February and start to March. And the models are beginning to pick up on this. The newest week 2 forecasts have taken more of that drier signal out, and they're replacing it with a more active go of it. Now, these only go to the 27th and 28th. I'm just telling you, though, the shifting around in this pattern in the Pacific is going to likely set up I'll just call it a more interesting March going forward. Now, speaking of that, take a look at what the European weeklies just did. This is the last couple of days of February and the first 5 days of March. And you notice there's that trough giving us southwest flow, and the models want to keep it around. This is through the middle of March, getting toward the end of March. Now, if you keep seeing troughs of low pressure in this area, this is really going to invigorate the atmosphere and just get things cranking. And that's why the newest update, the 30-day outlook for March, let's just get you to the end there. Look at that. Flow and open the Gulf. A lot of wet weather in the southeast. But this right in through here is what we need to see in March to make a big dent on this. That's why we're looking at this. All right. It's just what can we do to revive soil moisture going into our spring time frame. Now, what are the temperatures going to do? Well, in the near term, we're still quite mild in the central United States. And as we go here into Thursday, there's the cold air. But watch how limited of a shot this is. That's Thursday's temperatures getting into Friday. So remember, this is when we could get that second little push of some snow coming right in through here. It will be cold enough for that. But watch how brief this cold air outbreak is. It's already been there for 2 days in Montana. But as we go from Friday into Saturday, it's all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Sunday still lingers. But remember, cold down there this time of year is in the 50s. And then we take it on Monday and Tuesday, and the mild air is already coming back. Look at the central plains here. Very, very mild. We need to watch out for what this could mean, given the warmth now and the warmth that's returning for the winter wheat in this area. Just something to think about. Because the day 5 through 10 from the GFS looks like that, and the day 10 through 15 is now like this. And that matches, again, with what the European model is saying. That's day 10 through 15 from the European model. So all of that in context, let's just look at how, because this gets us to the end of February, how we're expecting March to behave. So I showed you this earlier in the week. We're going to look at it several times. It's just a good reminder. This is what the current ocean temperatures look like. And I'll state this again. As we go into spring and summer, these are the 2 key areas to watch for our weather pattern. The North Pacific part of the PDO signal and this part between the Baja and Hawaii, which is that PMM, Pacific Meridional mode. The Atlantic has stayed warm, and this is our El Nino, which is, again, just slowly fading into winter here. Notice it has not crashed yet, all right? So I want to be very clear about that. But using every year that we've had that has an El Nino in it, we just say, all right, what did those Marches do? And I want to be very clear. This shows a lot of what look like very cold colors, but this is 3 degrees colder in Fahrenheit than normal. All right. And you got to remember, normal in March, the temperatures across the southern part of the United States are very mild. Don't forget this too. In March, we will gain across the southern tier of the United States a full hour worth of extra sunshine. Across the northern tier of the United States, 2 hours. So March is a transition month, higher sun angles, more daylight hours. So we just need to remember that as you look at this. But whenever I see cooler here and mild there, this just says southwest flow. And that's why we see this area opening up wetter. Now the question is, will we really be drier in this region? Because historically, sure we are. But if you open up the Gulf with southwest flow, you're going to have to pull moisture into these areas. And that's why I think that maybe the ECMWF, which let's go back and look at it again, its March outlook is probably a bit more consistent with the picture east of the Rocky Mountains. I don't agree with what it has in the west. All right. So let's just take that in stride and go out there and look a little bit longer term as we get to the end of this week and next week. Okay, I want to do the same thing, but I would like to look at South America now. If I choose all those Aprils that have an El Nino, just to reiterate this story, this is a region that tends to have lower precipitation rates, and as a result, drier April precipitation totals, right, where we have a safrinha crop that's been planted. And should that be the case, this could be a major story for the safrinha crop, which is going in very quickly right now. The USDA, looking at their CHIRPS data set on the last 2 months, I just want to take note that we've been quite dry in pockets of Mato Grosso do Sul over toward parts of Paraná and Sao Paulo. This area right into here has been drier. We've even seen by looking at it on satellite, there we go. This is the Vegetation Health Index. So compared to a year ago, we're about average here, but this is looking worse than it did a year ago from satellite, while much of Argentina and southern Brazil and Uruguay are looking better. So that's just a quick kind of point to take there. As we look out over the next 10 days, it's still very wet across a pretty broad section of Brazil's central and eastern growing areas. We're drier in Rio Grande do Sul, drier in Paraguay, Uruguay, and much of Argentina is into a drier week as well. But remember, the temperatures are near normal to cooler than normal, so no major heat stress late in their season here. So I think I'll just stop there, and we know what we're watching now. So we'll keep you up to date on the newest updates for the long range, continue to build that story out, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.